My name is Leo. For 28 years, I've been the ghost at the family feast. While my relatives built empires and collected sports cars, I built a quiet life as a history teacher in a small Ohio town. I was the one who preferred the quiet truth of the past to the loud lies of the present. And at my grandfather's funeral, under a sky the color of bruised marble, that truth was about to detonate. In the library of the estate, a room that reeked of old leather and older secrets, the lawyer disassembled my grandfather's life into a series of financial transactions. My uncle Vernon got the controlling shares. My cousin Preston inherited the commercial real estate portfolio. My cousin Mallory received a trust fund so large the number sounded like a foreign language. They tried to look somber, but their eyes glittered with a greed so raw I could almost taste it. Then, all eyes turned to me. The family disappointment. The lawyer's lips tightened into a thin line as he slid a single, flimsy envelope across the vast desk. It wasn't thick with legal documents. It felt empty. Inside was a one-way plane ticket to Rome. That was it. No note. No explanation. Just a silent, one-way ticket to nowhere. The silence broke into a wave of muffled snickers. Preston didn't even bother to hide his smirk. "A vacation?" he whispered, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Guess that's all you're worth, Leo." The humiliation was a physical heat crawling up my neck. I was being erased. My existence boiled down to a punchline. 2 days later, sitting in the crushing silence of my apartment, I stared at that ticket. It felt like a monument to my failure. I was ready to tear it to shreds, to burn it, and to try to forget the whole wretched day. And then my phone rang. A number I didn't recognize. A voice calm and laced with an Italian accent spoke 6 words that changed everything. 6 words that were the key to a lock I never knew existed. This wasn't the end of my story. It was the first brutal move in a game my grandfather had been playing long after his death. And the revenge that followed. It wasn't loud and it wasn't violent. It was quiet and absolute, leaving my family with nothing but the echoing silence of their own ruin. So how does a single phone call unravel $1 million lie? And how did the grandson they wrote off become the one holding all the power? Stick around. This is just the beginning. If you think you know what justice looks like, think again. Please like this video, subscribe to the channel, share it with someone who needs a reminder that sometimes the quiet ones can be the most dangerous. My grandfather, Roland Whitmore, didn't just build a business, he built a kingdom. Whitmore Shipping wasn't just a company, it was a monument that cast a long, cold shadow over our entire family. And in that shadow, the rest of us were forced to grow, twisted and straining for a sliver of light. My uncle, Vernon Whitmore, was the heir apparent. In his late 50s, with a head of silver hair and custom-tailored suits, he was the public face of the empire. He lived in a penthouse in Chicago that looked more like a museum, all cold marble and modern art, a place where you were afraid to touch anything. His hobby was power. Not the pursuit of it, but the casual exercise of it. He collected people's loyalties and debts the way other men collect stamps. Then there were his children, my cousins. Preston, at 30, was a carbon copy of his father, but without the patience. He was a human wrecking ball in a $3,000 suit, running a private equity firm that basically existed to strip companies for parts. He lived for fast cars, faster deals, and the visible flinch of anyone he considered beneath him. And he considered almost everyone beneath him. His sister, Mallory, was a different kind of predator. 28, a socialite and influencer based in Miami. Her entire life was a carefully curated performance of wealth. Her business was her image. Her hobby was spending money with a ruthless, surgical precision designed to provoke maximum envy. She saw the world not in terms of people, but in terms of accessories and competitors. My father, Roland's younger son, was the family black sheep. He'd walked away from the shipping business decades ago to become a carpenter, to work with his hands. He married my mom, a school teacher, and they built a simple, happy life out in Ohio. To the rest of the family, his choice was a betrayal. To me, it was a blueprint for a life that actually meant something. But my parents died in a car accident when I was 16. I was pulled back into the Whitmore orbit. Forever the poor, pity case relative from the sticks. Grandpa Roland was the only one who never looked at me with pity. Our bond was forged on a different anvil, the chessboard. Every Sunday, in his vast, silent study, we'd play for hours. He never went easy on me. He'd demolish me, game after game, all while weaving in these cryptic lessons. "Leo," he'd say, his finger tapping the king, "any fool can play the opening. The amateur plays the middle game. But the master wins in the endgame with moves he set in motion 20 turns before anyone was paying attention." He'd stare at me, his eyes sharp and clear. "You have to be willing to sacrifice a queen early to checkmate the king later. You have to see the board beyond the pieces right in front of you." I thought he was talking about chess. I was too young to understand he was teaching me about our family. He was showing me how to see the invisible strings, the long game. He was trying to arm me for a war I didn't know was coming. The day after the funeral, the day after I was handed that ticket and their ridicule, I was lost. I was sitting on the floor of my childhood bedroom in my parents' old house. The ticket to Rome in one hand, my phone in the other. The shame was physical weight. I was about to book a flight back to Ohio, to my small, safe life, to forget any of this ever happened. That's when my phone vibrated. An unknown number with a +39 country code. "Italy," I answered, my heart hammering against my ribs. The voice on the other end was a low, calm baritone, weathered by age and cigarettes, speaking with a heavy Italian accent. "Signor Leo," the voice said. No hello, no introduction. Just 6 words, delivered with the gravity of a final verdict. "The board is set. Come play." The line went dead. My blood ran cold. It was his phrase, the one he whispered before he'd make a devastating, game-ending move on our Sunday chessboard. This was no random call. This was no mistake. That plane ticket wasn't a dismissal. It was an invitation to the real game. The one he'd been preparing me for my entire life. The pieces were moving, and I was no longer a spectator. I was a player. But I had no idea who my opponent was, or what the stakes truly were. If you think you know where this is going, trust me, you don't. The twists and turns are just beginning. Make sure you smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell, because you will not want to miss what happens when I land in Rome. The truth waiting for me. There was more shocking than anything I could have possibly imagined. The decision to get on that plane was the hardest of my life. It felt like jumping off a cliff into total darkness. With my last few dollars, I bought a cheap suitcase and boarded the flight to Rome. The whole 12-hour journey was tormented by doubt. Was this just a final, cruel joke from my grandfather? Was I the fool, chasing a phantom inheritance while my cousins solidified their power back home? The Rome airport was a chaotic symphony of noise and movement, which I wasn't prepared for. And standing there, holding a sign with my name misspelled, was the man from the phone call. He introduced himself as Lorenzo. He was in his 60s, with a weathered, serious face and eyes that had seen everything twice. He didn't smile, simply took my bag and said, "Your grandfather, he spoke of you always. We have far to go." We drove for over an hour, leaving the ancient city behind, climbing into rolling hills covered in neat rows of grapevines. The air changed, smelling of earth and sun-warmed leaves. We finally turned down a cypress-lined driveway, leading to a sprawling, sun-bleached villa called the Montri Estate. It wasn't a cold corporate empire. It was a home, the living, breathing thing. And waiting on the porch was a woman with kind eyes and silver hair, her face a roadmap of a life well lived. She looked at me and her hands flew to her mouth. "Roland." She whispered, "He has Roland's eyes." This was Sophia, my grandfather's wife, his real wife, the one he married 50 years ago on a trip to Italy, the love of his life, kept his secret from his entire American family. The world tilted on its axis. My grandfather, the titan of industry, had led a double life. This vineyard, this beautiful estate, was his true legacy, built not on cold ambition, but on love. And he had chosen me to be its keeper. But the revelations were just getting started. Lorenzo led me to my grandfather's private study in the villa. It was the polar opposite of his Chicago office. This one was warm, filled with books and the scent of wine barrels. On the desk was a sealed envelope with my name on it and a small video camera. With trembling hands, I pressed play. And there he was, Grandpa Roland, looking older and frailer, but with that same fierce intelligence in his gaze. "Leo," he began, his voice a soft rasp. "If you're watching this, it means you were brave enough to come. It means you trusted me. And now, I must tell you the truth. The company Whitmore Shipping. It's a ghost. It has been for years. Not only that, but it's drowning in debt, propped up by lies and empty promises. I left it to Vernon and the children, because that's all they ever understood, the illusion of wealth. They inherited a sinking ship. I felt the air leave my lungs. He had given them a time bomb. But you, Leo," he continued, his eyes softening, "you were different. You understood that real value isn't on a balance sheet, it's in the land. It's in the family you choose. This estate, this vineyard, it's not just profitable, it's thriving. Furthermore, it's your future. Not only that, but it's your truth." The weight of it was crushing. He hadn't just given me a vineyard. He had given me a weapon. Likewise, he had set me up to watch from a place of genuine strength as the world he'd built for them collapsed into dust. But the moral challenge was immediate and brutal. Part of me, a dark part I didn't want to acknowledge, thrilled at the thought of their downfall. They had humiliated and dismissed me my entire life. They deserved what was coming. Yet, they were still my family. My blood. Was I really going to sit here in this sun-drenched paradise and do nothing while they lost everything? The conflict was tearing me apart. And just as that internal war reached its peak, as I sat there grappling with the intoxicating poison of revenge, my phone rang. I looked at the screen. It was an American number. It was Preston. And I knew, at that moment, the first domino had finally fallen. What do you do when the people who hurt you are begging for help? Do you extend a hand or do you let them drown? The choice was mine, and the consequences would haunt me forever. Don't go anywhere, because the moment of truth is right here. The phone felt like a live wire in my hand. Preston's voice, usually dripping with arrogant confidence, was thin and strained, cracking with a panic I'd never heard before. "Leo, God, Leo, you have to help us." He was almost begging. "It's all gone. Everything. The company. It's not what we thought. The debts. They're astronomical. The banks are calling in the loans. Our assets are frozen. We're going to lose it all." I stayed silent, letting the weight of his desperation hang in the air. I walked out onto the villa's terrace, the morning sun warming my face. The view of the vibrant, healthy vineyard stretching out before me. I could hear the distant laughter of the workers, my new family. The contrast was dizzying. "I don't understand what you want me to do, Preston," I said, my voice calm and flat. "I'm just a history teacher. I got a plane ticket, remember? A consolation prize." He pleaded, a raw sob escaping him. "Please don't. We were wrong. We were all so wrong. Grandpa, he knew. He knew this would happen. You have to have something. He must have left you something. An account. A contact? Anything." This was the moment. The checkmate my grandfather had orchestrated from beyond the grave. The revenge wasn't in a shout. It was in a whisper. It wasn't in violence. It was in absolute, unshakable calm. "He did leave me something, Preston," I said, my gaze sweeping over the land, the villa, and the legacy that was now mine. He left me the truth. I could almost hear his heart stop through the phone. "The truth," he whispered, confused and terrified. "Whitmore Shipping was a hollow shell," I explained. "Not with malice, but with the simple, devastating force of a fact. Grandpa built his real fortune here. In land, in wine, in something real. He gave you the crumbling illusion because that's all you ever valued. He gave me the substance because he knew I was the only one who would understand what it truly meant." The silence on the other end was profound. It was the sound of a worldview shattering into a million pieces. The millions they'd fought over, schemed for, and mocked me for not having, were worthless. My single plane ticket had been worth more than all of them combined. You have an estate? A business. The question was a sound of a ghost. "I do," I said. "It's thriving." Then came the question I knew was coming, the one that would seal their humiliation and my ultimate victory. "Leo, can you help us? Can you loan us?" "No," The word was quiet, final, and absolute. It wasn't spoken with anger or gloating. It was a statement of principle, a boundary drawn in steel. But we're family, he cried, resorting to the last card he had left. A concept they had never honored until it was their only hope. Yes, I said, the emotion finally breaking through my calm. Not for them, but for my grandfather. You are. And because you're family, I won't let you starve. There will be no yachts, no penthouses, and no more pretending. But if you want to learn what real work is, if you want to earn an honest living, there might be a place for you here. You can start at the bottom, in the vineyards. You can learn what our grandfather actually stood for. The offer was a mercy, but it was also the most profound revenge imaginable. I wasn't destroying them. I was offering them salvation on my terms, in my world, the very world they had spent a lifetime looking down upon. I was forcing them to acknowledge that the failure of the family was now their only possible savior. The call ended with his stunned silence. I stood there, the Italian sun on my face, the deed to a legacy in my name, and the silent, satisfying knowledge that the game was over. And I had one. The dust, as they say, eventually settled, but not in the way anyone expected. My Uncle Vernon was too proud, too broken by the collapse of his paper empire, to ever come to Italy. He faded into obscurity, a ghost of the titan he once pretended to be. But Preston and Mallory? They showed up 6 months later, suitcases in hand, their designer clothes looking out of place against the rich, dark soil of the vineyard. There was no more arrogance, only a shell-shocked humility. They took me up on my offer. They started at the bottom, learning the difference between a Merlot and a Sangiovese, not from a wine list, but from the grapes on the vine. It wasn't easy. There were blisters and backaches and a lot of silent resentment. But slowly, something in them began to change. They weren't just learning a trade. They were learning a value system. They were learning that wealth isn't something you take. It's something you build with your own 2 hands, alongside people you care about. I didn't just get a business. I gained a brother and a sister I never really had. The 3 of us, under the warm Italian sun, began to rebuild not a company, but a family. A real one this time. Sophia became the grandmother we all needed, and Lorenzo's stern guidance became the loving wisdom we'd all been missing. The Monterey estate didn't just produce world-class wine. It became a sanctuary for lost souls to find their way home, and me. I found my purpose. I wasn't Leo the family failure or Leo the overlooked grandson. I was Leo, the keeper of my grandfather's true legacy. A legacy of patience, of strategy, and most importantly, of love. The revenge I thought I wanted to be turned out to be hollow. The real victory was peace. It was the quiet satisfaction of knowing I had honored my grandfather's trust. And in doing so, I had saved the very people who had once tried to break me. So what's the moral of this story? It's that in a world obsessed with the flash of money and the noise of status, the real power is often silent. It's in the integrity to do the right thing, even when you've been wronged. It's in the courage to follow a path that makes no sense to anyone else. My grandfather's greatest lesson wasn't about chess. It was about character. He knew that anyone could spend a fortune, but it takes a real person to build a legacy. He didn't just leave me a vineyard. He left me a question, and I'll leave it with you. When everyone around you is chasing the glitter, do you have the strength to look for the gold? When you're handed a map to a treasure everyone can see, do you have the courage to follow the one secret path that leads to something real? True wealth was never in the bank account they gave my cousins. It was in the soil, in the family, and in the truth he entrusted to me. If this story made you think, if it made you feel something, then do me a favor. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment below and tell me what you would have done in my shoes. And subscribe to the channel for more stories about life, legacy, and the quiet power of getting the last laugh without ever having to say a word.